Welcome back to Al Jazeera's Head to Head. My guest tonight is Ranil Wickremesinghe, former Prime Minister, former President of Sri Lanka. Ranil Wickremesinghe, thank you so much for being here tonight. We talked in part one about your presidency. We talked about the Easter Sunday attacks. Sri Lanka's brutal civil war lasted 26 years. It claimed the lives of an estimated 100,000 people or more. You yourself tried to broker a ceasefire with the LTTE, also known as the Tamil Tigers, in 2002. But last year when you were president, the UN said, to date, the government has rarely even acknowledged the serious violations that occurred in the conflict or provided victims with adequate redress. In the 16 years since the end of the war, you've been Prime Minister 4 times and President once. Can you tell our audience today how you believe justice has been served on your watch for the victims of the civil war?
No contest. UN has said that. I'm not contesting. Next question, please.
That wasn't my question. My question was, how has justice been served on your watch for the victims?
I said no contest.
I don't know what that means.
I mean, this is what you say. If I go to answer, you will shout on me. So I said, all right, guilty as charged, no contest or whatever it is, get it.
Welcome back to Zees Political Arrow, everybody. Today we got the return of ex-President Ranil, a man who's clearly mastered the fine art of not answering questions. Mehdi Hasan is out here playing chess, lobbing sharp, pointed questions, while Ranil's over there playing hide-and-seek with the truth. It's like watching a magician perform sleight of hand, except the only thing disappearing is accountability. Strap in, folks, this isn't just an interview, it's a masterclass in how to say a whole lot of nothing while somehow keeping a straight face. Let's see how long he keeps up with this.
So you believe the victims of the civil war have been...
I don't believe anything. You're not giving me a chance to speak, so I'm not saying anything. I said no contest. So bring the next question, please.
It's a little bit childish for a former president of a country to not be able to answer the question.
I'm saying no contest. If I'm childish, Gandhi was also childish. I'm only doing what Gandhi did.
Gandhi didn't answer interview questions.
He didn't answer, he didn't even in British courts, he didn't. You don't know history. What can I do? We are a non-violent nation. We are from the Himalayas.
You're a non-violent nation?
I'm a non-violent
I'm literally
person.
asking about a civil war that lasted 26 years and killed over 100,000 people.
No contest again. There was no civil war for 20 years. What was the civil war?
There wasn't a civil war.
Will you let me speak without interrupting? Then I will say what
If you can answer the question, yes. This is not a platform for you to give political speeches.
I said no contest. You said I'm making political speeches. I'm a politician. So no contest to get on to the next one.
Okay, let's try this. On your watch, there was an Office of Missing Persons that you set up. Your office investigated 6,000 cases of disappearances. Can you tell us how many people were found by that
No
office?
contest again. If I say anything, it's a political speech.
I'm just asking how many people were found.
I will...
6,000 disappearances. Is it a joke to you?
No, the number who have disappeared, according to Francis, was far more. We are trying to...
Exactly. Amnesty says 60,000. I'm saying 6,000 because I knew
No, there were 14,000 names that had come. So we are trying to do that. Again, split them into 2 lots. Those who were involved in the Mullawaikal incident and those who were outside. Because not only the war there, we were talking about the disappearance in the south and others. Then once you identify the Mullawaikal, that's the big problem here. Then are there other numbers? Because 40,000 was not the big number that came. The disappearances, many of them, we are still going on.
How many were found by your office? Why is it such a hard question for you to answer?
What?
6,000 disappearances were investigated. How many people were found?
14,000, of which they're still going on.
16 people were found. Isn't that an embarrassing number? On your watch, only 16 people, 16.3%.
Sorry, that was done through different groups. Large number are missing. We had an ethnic conflict in the country. It's something which has struck all of us. There are a large number of you here because you couldn't live in the north. So let us look at how we are going to solve it. Not only the question of missing persons, but what has happened. It is not a simple civil war as such. She will, of course, disagree. But if you are not allowing me what to say and how that we could bring it around.
Has justice been served to the victims of the civil war?
No, justice has not been served to any of the communities.
Okay. Why was justice not served on your watch?
Okay, I have answered your question that justice has not been served.
The question.
So after that, you say what?
Okay, why did you reappoint last year as your Chief of Defense Staff a man named General Shavendra Silva, who the US government blacklisted for gross violations of human rights, namely extrajudicial killings? How can there be truth, reconciliation and unity, which is a commission you started, when you're keeping on board generals accused of gross human rights violations in that conflict?
General Shavendra Silva was there. He said he's willing to stand any inquiry In our ones, we had not found anything. The Americans, though they blacklisted him, can't say what it is about. He served in UN and part of the office. As far as I was concerned, it's a practice not to replace military commanders during election. I didn't want to go and change it, but when I took over, I checked on it, and I was satisfied that General Silva was not involved in it. It's the US that has done it.
US and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, and the European Union.
Yes, but there is the US, there are no charges. He's willing. In fact, he's one of those who want the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to come into being.
So you set up this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and last year, when you were president, you got an open letter from victims of the Civil War, journalists, activists in the North and the East, and they said there's no point to this commission when they're still being subjected to, quote, surveillance, intimidation and harassment by security agencies and land grabs. Why were your security agencies subjecting them to surveillance, harassment and land grabs?
There have not been many. There have been some instances we stopped it, but I did not deal with it personally.
Why?
I kept out.
But it's hard to talk about truth and reconciliation if people are still being subjected to human rights abuse.
As I told you, we inquired. Some were correct, some were not. But I will not. I am not going to answer any more of this. I feel there are a lot more to be done to get justice for the people of the country or the Tamils.
Okay, let's go to Madhura Rasaratnam, who's a senior politics lecturer at City University, executive director of Pearl, an advocacy group for Tamil human rights in Sri Lanka. As a Tamil, Madhura, is it fair to say that the two people that a lot of Tamils in Sri Lanka want to see in a court of law are Mahinda and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who were respectively president and defense minister for the last most violent years of the Civil War, both of them accused of multiple war crimes? Should they have been put on trial by now by successive Sri Lankan governments, including Mr. Wickremesinghe's?
I think, yes, the time for justice is long past. Mr. Wickremesinghe's attitude to your question about justice for the victims, the callousness, just exemplifies the attitude of the Sri Lankan establishment writ large and how we got to a point of, mass atrocities, right, on that scale. And just to say, of course, Gaza is very much on our minds at the moment, but there are unbearable similarities between what happened on the beaches of Mullawaikal and what happened in Gaza. In both cases, you have populations hemmed against the sea, subject to humanitarian siege conditions, incessant aerial bombardment, with atrociously high casualties, medical procedures being done without anesthetic on purpose. The UN estimates that about 40,000 people died in a space of 5 months. At the end of the war, 1,000 people were dying a day. Many, many more are unaccounted for. Those crimes occurred because you have a political system of which Mr. Wickremesinghe is a part for the past 70 years that has prioritized ethnocratic politics, pleasing the majority at the expense of good governance, at the expense of fairness, at the expense of justice, right? At the expense of efficiency. So what happens when you get that? Okay. You get escalating hatred against other groups, and you get poor governance leading to economic collapse.
Let's bring in Nirj Deva, who's a former British MP, served as an envoy for President Wickremesinghe when he was in office. Just respond to what you heard from Madhura there about both the callousness of the approach to the war, but also the lack of accountability for the Rajapaksas. Yes. You were part of the Conservative Party in the UK. You know that David Cameron, Conservative leaders, called for international investigation of the war.
Watching this interview, there is an underlying thread which you need to recognize, and that is that the enforcement of law and order in Sri Lanka is much wanted. President Wickremesinghe's own house, with all his precious books and paintings, was burnt. To this day, not a single person has been arrested. So the question is not what President Wickremesinghe can or cannot do. It is whether that lousy system of justice is viable or it needs to be reformed. Now, that is where we all should focus our attention. If you want to look at Ranil Wickremesinghe's role in the ethnic war, look at what he did when he was Prime Minister, when he invited the LTT to give up arms and come into the democratic system. And what happened? He broke the LTT in two. One half of the LTT decided to come into the democratic fold. I mean, quite frankly, sitting in the British Parliament, I was in European Parliament, I was outraged that terrorists were now given cars and given seats in Parliament.
Understood. Mr. Wickremesinghe, you didn't investigate. We just talked about the Rajapaksas for war crimes. Some people say you should be investigated. During the early part of the civil war, the Sri Lankan government faced an uprising, as you know, from the JVP, a leftist group whose current leader is now the president. There was this government commission of inquiry that found that in the late 80s, you were, quote, a main architect of securing a housing complex that was used for the purposes of illegally detaining, torturing, and killing individuals linked to the JVP. The government inquiry reported that you, quote, to say the least, knew it was being used for illegal detentions and torture while you were living and working there. You didn't know what was going on there? You weren't involved?
Where is the report?
Sorry?
Where is the report?
It's called the Batalanda Commission report.
So where is the report? Read from the report.
I just did read from the report.
You didn't read from the report.
It is quite clear from the available material that insofar as the securing and allocation of the houses at the Batalanda houses are concerned, the main architects had been the then Minister of Industries, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe.
I deny all those allegations, and I'm asking you to quote that commission report. This is supposed to...
I just quoted it to you.
No, so where is that commission? Where had that commission report been tabled?
There's a lot of evidence in this report.
No, but it's not what evidence. There has to be a commission report.
There is a report. It's called the Batalanda Commission report.
There is no commission report. The commission report has to be tabled out.
Okay, but the report still exists, whether it's tabled in Parliament or not.
It's not tabled in Parliament, it's not report.
Okay. In the report, a key witness who was your caretaker and, quote, trusted employee testified that you were leading meetings about the torture of detainees there. He died. He was 36 years old. Just days before you testified to the commission, Vincent Fernando was his name, and he testified that you wanted the suspects at Batalanda, quote, destroyed. That's what he testified.
He never gave evidence.
He did give evidence.
No report was tabled. There was nothing to be found against me. That was an army camp that was established in a former housing scheme. Any case, that was not tabled in Parliament. There was nothing to be found against me.
Vincent stated that what he understood under the circumstances was that Mr. Wickremesinghe wanted the suspects destroyed.
Then asked if Vincent was displayed by. I was not in the government. I was in the opposition. I've been in the opposition for 10 years. Look, there was no report. So you are quoting, if there's a report...
You were the Minister of Industry.
Look, but I'm telling you, there's no report.
I do have a report, but I've just literally read from
no
it.
Report.
Let's bring in Francis Harris, former BBC correspondent. Francis, what do you make of what you're hearing about Batalanda? What is the lack of accountability from Batalanda, the civil war? What does it mean, in your view?
I'm flabbergasted. I mean, I have a copy of the report here. It says printed by the order of the government. I'm sorry, but there is a report.
It was not tabled in
Batalanda
Parliament
report,
because
in English
they could not stand by it.
I mean, what you're hearing from former President Wickremesinghe is rather remarkable. What do you mean?
I think it's astonishing. I think his remarks about Shavendra Silva, the general he referenced, I mean, those are astonishing. To say that there isn't a case for Shavendra Silva to answer when the United States and the OHCHR, the UN, have made a case against him is utterly insulting to victims, and I think it just shows the impunity that he has supported. That's absolutely shocking. And we look basically at the JVP uprising time, the late 80s, where torture was endemic, where enforced disappearance happened on a massive scale, and we look at the connection between that and the civil war, and what the connection is that you see the same alleged perpetrators, and you might say also some of the same politicians who were involved in one era of violence went on into the next era of violence, and that's because there was never any accountability, because there was complete impunity, and this just is a cycle that repeats itself. And I'm afraid that somebody who's been in power that long needs to be answerable for that.
Isn't that the problem? No accountability.
Sorry, Francis, I was in the opposition. We've asked the government to prosecute me if there's something wrong, and they said there was nothing to be prosecuted on. I was here in London, I was in Oslo, and I was in Brussels, the time of the last 2 weeks of the war, trying to arrange to see what relief that can be given.
And that's a wrap, folks. Ex-Prime Minister Ranil serving up his greatest hits: duck, dodge, deny, repeat. While Mehdi brought facts hotter than Lincoln Curry, Ranil treated this whole thing like a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. War crimes? 100,000 dead? No contest. 60,000 vanished? Let's split the difference and call it a day. Torture chambers? What chambers? This man didn't just sidestep justice. He tap danced on his grave, all while quoting Gandhi like a bargain bin motivational poster. Generals blacklisted? Classic Ranil. Dismissing UN reports? Chef kiss. Ignoring his own commissioner's torture allegations? I was in Oslo, sure, Ranil, and Nixon was just a plumber. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Ranil turn no contest into a national slogan? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, y'all, and catch you on the next one.